are back for Indian country and do to safeguard your treaty rights in Oklahoma. First, we talked about the 5 cases that they implement throughout Indian country. Then we talked about sovereignty. Then we talked about what they called the Worcester cases pertaining to of the Shawnees. You know what I mean? None of them. So, just to recap, let me put these Riddlers on. They had talked about how that became, what happened, who had the actual claim and authority to the land. Macintosh, and there you have that. Then we talked about the doctrines of discovery, and those so-called legal theories, the legal theories. The 3 variations of the doctrine of discovery include the preemptive right, absolute title, and expansive title. What is that to indigenous people when it's just all red people here? Just the red people. We had jurisdiction, and we still do. You just don't remember that because you were taken into captivity to America on that like an American, not like an Egyptian. But some of y'all might be walking like an Egyptian. I hope not. You have definitely gotten the wrong country for sure. So we also talked about the legal fiction. Remember, fiction. We talked about the Cherokee Nation versus Georgia, how that introduces the Cherokee in the state of Georgia. That's the state, not the federal. So that leaves you with where we're at today, like Oklahoma, where we're not Public Law 280. So they always kind of reference Worcester versus, who is that again? Another one, Georgia again. Now you got to comprehend that when they talk about Cherokee Nation, it's not like today in Oklahoma. No, they're talking about the people who wear their regalia, wear the colors, where they sit in that tribal government, around holy fire in the 7 arbors of the Cherokees, at least at Stokes. They have 7 arbors at Stokes. So if Stokes is at this case, if they were there, their nation, if that's Redbird, maybe Achota, I'm not sure about them. I just know Stokes. I've always known them growing up. So if that's Cherokee Nation, then why weren't they at Georgia case? Anyone? I have TikTok. Anyone? Who's that? Who's that? Pooch Mama. That's, if you need your puppy washed or bathed or anything like that, you can hit Poochie Main Mama. I think that's what it is. I can't read it all. But she'll drive out to you and wax on and wax off your puppy. Now back to the show. I just coined you in. Again, we're on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, and Twitch Live. So you can find me, if you're already on Facebook, you find me as Michael James, I believe, or maybe change it to Mick James. It's just People's Law on YouTube. And then we're on Twitch as Mick James Twitch. There you have it. Okay, so we're talking about the Worcester cases with the 7 missionaries. That sounds like a joke, don't it? What kind of joke is that? Well, let's continue on. Have you heard the story about the 7 missionaries that were arrested and convicted for refusing to obey the state light, leading to an appeal to the Supreme Court? So they're pimping their books and everything, singing Amazing Grace. They're singing the old rugged cross. They're singing whatever songs they were singing. And they said, hold up. You can't be singing them songs in Indian country. You can't be selling them songs to those red people. You need a license. They said, what do you mean? We're spreading the news, the good news. They said, oh no, a license you're not. Oh, the Lord no bounds. Oh, it does here in this state. And so the missionaries got arrested. Figure that out. What they look like, from another country. What were they dressed like? They weren't riding bicycles or even bicycles around. You know what I mean? They were hanging out with the Amish. Were they around? Why did they get arrested? It's me. We're going to find out why. So the court held that the discovery doctrine did not restrict the rights of Indians in their territory. So that means sovereignty. Once again, red people have jurisdiction. Remember, there were only a very few people on the doctrine of discovery that came on a boat. We were vast. Do not forget that, especially if you're Cheyenne. But man, you got a whole bunch of Chapos. I tell you, there's like a freaking army. Have a softball tournament, you'll see them all show up. But anyway, the court ruled that the Cherokee Nation, so if that was Stokes or Redbird, was a distinct community with self-government, exempt from state law. That's what they're saying. What do you mean? It means this. People, state law, because you're federal. This is a Supreme Court case. This is how we got here. That's what they're saying. It's their own words. The court ruled that the Cherokee Nation was a distinct community. So that means Stone Redbird, you're your own government, which is true. You have a treaty. We have a treaty. If you read it and you stand for it, you can protect your children. So what does that look like today? Today, if you get letters from the Department of the Interior of who you are as a IIM account, as a treaty individual, you're up here. You are federal with international global protections who have formed a corporation You formed the corporation to protect you from any fraudulent, any kind of stealing, kidnapping, trafficking children in these imposter tribal. You're the tribal government. You're the shareholder. You're the one that has been taken advantage of in these imposter courts. So what do? How do you turn from these invaders into Indian country? When it says in Article 6 of the Treaty of Greenville, if you're Turkey or Big Jim spoke at the Shawnee, in your court tab, or even in your preamble, anywhere where it says Treaty of Greenville, it has its own tab. So we'll go right to that Treaty of Greenville tab, and same law of the land is for the Kaspokata Shawnees here in Oklahoma, Little Axe. So the Treaty of Greenville, it has people from where we were at in Ohio Valley, Indiana, Chicago, Illinois, all over Kaspokata Shawnees treaty with the American government. And it'll tell you what to do with Article the Treaty of Greenville. If any citizen of the United States or any other white person or persons, which is a business, a corporation like Modoc Nation, Chickasaw Nation, any of these mofos that come into your jurisdiction, read what it's to do, would they come in there? Anyone, as you just read right here in Article 6 of the Treaty of Greenville, you, the sovereign, from the ceremonial grounds, sit in the arbors, those who are practice faith of time immemorial. This is your agreement with the American government. If these people come into Indian country, I just read to you what kind. If these presume to settle upon the lands now relinquished by the United States, such citizens or other persons shall be out of the protection of the United States, and the Indian tribe on whose land the settlement shall be made may drive off the settler, or punish him in such manners as they shall think fit. So, by knowing that in your Treaty of Greenville, Article 6, and you know your law, people, when you harm children, your tribal government of your culture that Creator had governed for you for centuries, it tells you what to do to these people. So you can turn to chapter 7 of this book of our family, because grammar, it has our tribal government. Our tribal government is to be in our tribal court, which is the law. If you was with the last broadcast, connection. So in the courts tab, the law to be applied, treaty, the law to be applied upon these individuals that come into Indian country to abduct you, take your children, traffic. All these are in your country. So how do you get from here to there? Well, I'm glad you asked. So August 28th, for the record, we have filed the crimes of Indian country upon the indigenous people. August 28th, last year. So they're always trying to motion to dismiss. Again, I do not use my words. Upon graduating from the University of Oklahoma College of Law, I use the professor's words. So just like in the introductions to Indian country, as Professor Lindsay Robertson, University of Oklahoma College of Law, explains in his lecture on crimes in Indian country, the federal fiduciary duty arises because with the duty of protection comes the power. See United States versus Kagama, 18 U.S.C. 375. Plaintiff respectfully opposes the motions to dismiss filed by defendants. These motions are frivolous, collusive, and contrary to the Supremacy Clause, binding treaties, and federal law. So I use Professor Robertson's words from that class to the Eastern Federal Court. For $5, you can do a writ of habeas corpus to bring these fraud aider and abettors. And so you'll get more of these other agencies, like I just shared with you, of Article 6 of the Treaty of Greenville are outside the protections of the United States of America. And so I had to do another filing because there's more frauds went into Indian country, abducting, kidnapping, trafficking, and a whole lot more that you're not aware of, that MMIW happens in the imposter tribal courts. So again, we filed again against the aider and abettors that you can see case number. We still have a federal investigation case going on against everything here that goes to children and those of treaty. So again, if you see all aider and abettors, then you got to make a timeline from the day of the doctrines of discovery all the way to using the professor's words from the University of Oklahoma College of Law, like I do here. I added more people. I'm going to add more to it. So again, I used their words, not mine, from the University of Oklahoma College of Law. As Professor Stephen Hager, University of Oklahoma College of Law, explains in his lecture upon Indian Child Welfare Act, quotes, "Now it's time to talk about what happens if you don't follow the Indian Child Welfare Act at 25 USC section 1914 says that any Indian child subject for a foster care placement or termination of parental rights under state law, any parent or Indian custodian from whose such child was removed, or the Indian child's tribe may petition any court of competent jurisdiction to invalidate an action upon showing that the action violated the provisions of section 1911, 1912, 913 of this title." In other words, if you fail to follow the jurisdictional requirements, if you fail to provide an attorney or give proper notice under 1912, if you don't produce active efforts, if you don't have the appropriate expert testimony, or if you violate the voluntary processes of 1913, a court of competent jurisdiction can do away with those things. You won't have to go back to square one. And that's in the Welfare Act, Lecture 14th, Court of Competent Jurisdiction, Lecture 15, Placement of Indian by Professor Stephen Hager, Juris Doctor, University of Oklahoma. Again, as Professor Hager, University of College Law, emphasized in his Indian Child Welfare Act and Oklahoma Child Welfare Act lectures, that the procedural safeguards of 25 USC subsection 1911 through 1913 and 25 CFR subsection 23.11 to 23.118 are mandatory. Failure to comply with any of these steps voids a state or tribal court's jurisdiction to remove, place an Indian child. Now that's from Professor Stephen Hager, University of Oklahoma College of Law. So again, we're always getting paperwork of another judge, and that's what I'm working on for this weekend. So stay tuned as I share with you how to safeguard and protect your children through the federal court for $5. $5, writ of habeas corpus. You build it, they give you the evidence. They will mail you. These frauds will mail you things. Watch out for these frauds. They're big frauds. They're from another state. They don't even have a tribal court. What are they doing? They're not on treaty. Look them up. Be careful who's trying to come to kidnap you. They have no jurisdiction. You're a sovereign. If you have letters and correspondence from the Department of the Interior, you are a country within a country. You have a treaty contract with the American government. So when these corporations come into Indian country, they're outside the protections of the United States. And you can use whatever law of your people upon them as you see fit. So I hope you got that right, because that's just the truth. That's how I've been making my stand since graduating from the University of Oklahoma College of Law in 2018, with federal tribal preference to work at my own corporation. Form 4432 was denied employment because the frauds are still in charge. So you got to remove yourself from their jurisdiction. How do you do that? Well, you can go to the enrollment. You go to the enrollment tab of your code of laws to take yourself off this jurisdiction. So you can go here, and there's a form in the enrollment side to voluntarily remove yourself from this jurisdiction back to Where's my other stuff at? Back to the Treaty of Sovereignty and correspondence with the buffalo logo, where you're supposed to be federally. Everyone that has been out there has been duped to turn in your buffalo logo CDIB in exchange for a corporation card. You got to get out of from their jurisdiction. Back to the shareholder, back to the sovereign, the ones who made this corporation to protect you. And it hasn't. So you have to remove yourself from this jurisdiction voluntarily and go back to Anadarko and get your buffalo logo, get your IIM account and your treaty land established. Start getting your farm number so you can get back to sovereignty and food sovereignty and getting these grants so we don't have to have our land leased out, because these people ain't helping you one bit. Look how many centuries that we've been in here as sovereign people with a tribal government that has been established before any colony or any boat under the doctrine of discovery ever got here. So it's just the truth. It's my truth I share with you on what has happened to my children, even from the Desert Storm. The baby that was adopted out only found me 2 years ago. There is all the protections for her, and it didn't happen. For my son also. The very court that has our CDIB cards and treaty did not even apply. We have our own court for our people, this court. So they should have taken me to this court where we would have won, because in our court is supposed to be our law, but it never has. So we've always been MMIW through the imposter tribal courts. So I just read to you and shared with you what Professor Hager said, what happens if you don't follow the Indian Child Welfare Act. Peace and fried bread grease, Madon, Yahweh, and a ho. Udal Palumye.